Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Ashtoshtoshtar Shri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Ashtoshtoshtar Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaura Premanande Haribo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So I'll chant the verse. Tatachoktam na kuryat kurichit sakyam manasi hanavashtite yadvishram bhat chirat chiram chaskanda tapa aiswaram.
Okay. If you could repeat after me. Tata, so, cha, and, uktam, it is said, na, never, kuryat, should do, karhichit, at any time or with anyone, sakyam, friendship, manasi, in the mind, he, certainly, anantavishtati, which is very restless, yat, in which, Vishrambat, from placing too much faith. Chirat, for a long time. Chiram, practice. Kashchanda, just became disturbed. Tapaha, the austerity. Ashvaram, of great personalities like Lord Shiva. And the great sage Sobari. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace. HG Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. All the learned scholars have given their opinion. The mind is by nature very restless, and one should not make friends with it. If we place full confidence in the mind, it may cheat us at any moment. Even Lord Shiva became agitated upon seeing the Murti form of Lord Krishna, and Saubhari Muni also fell down from the mature stage of yogic perfection. The first business of one trying to advance in spiritual life is to control the mind and senses. As Sri Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Mamaivam shaje viloke jiva bhuta sanatana manashashtindriyani prakriti sthani karshati. Although the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and are therefore in a transcendental position, they are still suffering in this material world and struggling for existence due to the mind and the senses. To get out of this false struggle for existence and become happy in the material world, one has to control the mind and senses and be detached from material condition. One should never neglect austerities and penances. One should always perform them. Lord Rishabhadev personally showed us how to do this. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th Canto, Chapter 19, Text 17 is specifically stated, Matra Swashra Dihitra Va Naviktamasano Bhavit Balavan Indriya Gramo Vidyam Sham Api Karshate. A grihasta, vanaprastha, sannyasi or brahmachari should be very careful when associating with women. One is forbidden to sit down in a solitary place, even with one's mother, sister, or daughter. In our Krishna consciousness movement, it has been very difficult to disassociate ourselves from women in our society, especially in Western countries. We are therefore sometimes criticized, but nonetheless, we are trying to give everyone a chance to chant the Hare Krsna Maha Mantra and thus advance spiritually. If we stick to the principle of chanting the Hare Krsna Maha Mantra offenselessly, then, by the grace of Srila Haridas Thakur, we may be saved from the allurement of women. However, if we are not very strict in chanting the Hare Krsna Maha Mantra, we may at any time fall victim to women. If you could chant with me. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parkamalam Shri Gurun Vaisnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Lagnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchangorong Ange Radhe Vrindavaneshvare Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyo Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would advise, when you get up, you beat the mind with shoes 100 times. And when you go to bed, you beat the mind again with the broomstick 100 times. So he's stressing how important we should control the mind. And Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that the mind is very strong, obstinate, restless, turbulent. And he says that to subdue it is very difficult, more harder than controlling the wind. And Srila Prabhupada comments that the mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence. The nature of the mind is flickering. It accepts one thing and it rejects the same thing the next moment. In the purport, it mentions that one should not make friends with the mind because at any moment it may cheat us. When you're going out on book distribution, you try to get the people's attention. And one of the ways that I found very effective ways is to ask them a question. And so I've been trying this new technique. When someone comes to the table, I ask them, hey, who's your best friend and who's your worst enemy? And if they're a couple, they'll tell me, oh, she's my best friend. Like, they're forced to say it. And when I ask them, who's your worst enemy, some of them will say, I don't have an enemy. Or they'll say, it's myself. But I tell them more specifically, it's the mind. And then I introduce the Bhagavad Gita. I show the chapter 6, verse 6 verse. For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, the same mind will remain the greatest enemy. And a lot of them, they could agree to it. I asked one person this question, and she said, Satan. And I told her, that's good, but your worst enemy is actually your mind. And sometimes when I ask them this question, they don't know what to say. So I have to encourage them, please take a book. This book will help you to understand who's your real friend. And people are hankering after dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, which is religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and then moksha, or liberation at the next life. Another principle is when artha is earned by a dharma, then kama will become very distorted or perverted, like in the Mahabharata, the gambling match. Maharaja Yudhishthira earned the resources rightly and justly. He sent all of his 4 brothers in all 4 directions to collect wealth. So the Pandavas came back with a lot of wealth, and Kshatriyas, they can't refuse a challenge. If someone challenges them in a fight or a gambling, they have to accept it. So the Kurus, they accepted the Pandavas' gambling match. They challenged them, and then they had to accept. And Duryodhana, he didn't even play in the dice game. He had someone else play. Do you know who that was? Shakuni. And Shakuni, he had nothing to do with Hastinapur. He lived in Gandhara. He knew that Yudhishthira was fond of playing dice, and so he took advantage of this. And he also knew he was not expert. At dice, Shakuni had no equal anywhere in the world. When resources are earned by illegal means, it is a dharma that leads to enjoyment in a perverted way. You see all these millionaires, to get to where they're at, they must have performed a lot of bad activities to get to where they're at. And you see the type of enjoyment in the material world. And Balaram Prabhu, yesterday he was talking about Las Vegas. That's where the people enjoy their senses. Intoxication, gambling, meat eating, illicit relations with women, things like that. And as devotees, or here in the ashram, we don't watch TV, movies, or play video games. But when you turn on the TV, what do they have? Advertisement. And advertisement commercials, they give an idea, and then the mind starts thinking, hey, that's true, I can get that. It'll make me happy. So the mind shouldn't be accepted as a friend. When we practice Krishna consciousness in this world, and we create a proper legacy so others can take to Krishna consciousness, we create devotees. But if there is no right example, what does it do? It creates a legacy of atheism. So Srila Prabhupada, he says that we should teach by setting an example, by examples. Krishna consciousness means broad-mindedness. Therefore, bhakti or Krishna consciousness has a conflict with small-mindedness. And I was listening to a lecture, and this devotee said that Agasura, he was very big in size, shape, body, but he was very small-minded. He wanted to come to Vrindavan to kill Krishna, solely just because he was the sister of Putana, and Krishna killed her. So these are the bodily concepts of life. He's my husband, he's my wife, he's my sister, my brother, things like that. The behavior of a disciple can be an ornament or a scar on the reputation of the spiritual master. So we should keep that in mind. I was distributing in La Jolla Cove a few days ago, and I met a Russian couple. And they were teaching me a very weird way of meditating. So the guy was telling me, would you like to see? So I said, sure. So within his bag, he opened it up, and he took out this, it looked like a chessboard, like a wooden rectangular piece. And you can open it in half. And what was inside? It was nails. So I asked him, what do you do? And he said, you step on this. So he said, by stepping on this, you control the mind, the breathing, and so that way the mind gets distracted from the pain. So I asked them, how long do you do this for? And then they said 20 minutes. So they asked me, what do you guys do for meditation? So I told them we chant the Hare Krsna Maha Mantra on our beads. And when they asked me, how long do you do that for? I told them 2 hours. So they were very surprised. And a lot of people just staying still, sitting down in one place, that's a form of austerity. They can't do it. They're fidgeting, they're looking everywhere, they don't know what to do. And so many people, they devise or concoct ways to meditate, things like that. I met this other guy in Balboa Park, and he said, my meditation is sleeping. So I told him, well, sleeping, that means you're not meditating. So I didn't want to discuss with them. And I went to a retreat in Deer Park Monastery. My cousin had invited me to go there. And so during the last portion of the program, it was a meditation. And there was a lady, she was playing the harp in the back. And everybody was encouraged to, breathe, meditate, however they want. And so I was chanting on my beads. And then when I opened my eyes, everybody was asleep. In fact, my own cousin, he was snoring. So I said, oh, this is meditation, for them. So I kind of laughed at the idea. And everyone is performing some type of austerity. 50? There was a lot of people. And yeah, most of them, I could hear snoring. Yeah. And then, and after that, after the meditation, they wake them up, and then they have a little talk. And so everybody's performing austerities. Students, workers, parents, athletes, they're all performing some type of austerity. Students, they're forced to study, even though they don't want to. And it's actually good that they study in order to get a better future or a better career. If they want to graduate, they should study. And professional athletes, they train and train and train. Sometimes they train them for hours. And also at a very early age. And workers, I have a cousin, and he's part of the Navy. He has to drive to Camp Pendleton every day. And he says it's traffic. So people wake up, they have to drive to work, which is sometimes 2 hours away. And parents, they know that the duties of parents, it's very difficult because it has a lot of responsibilities. But parents, they still do it because they see it as a duty. And most people that are responsible, they accept these austerities. And most of them, they're done for a material result. Whether it's a paycheck, whether it's a diploma, things like that. And one of the examples that I hear is the tapasya that Queen Kunti and King Pandu, they performed tapasya for 1 year to invoke the Pandavas. Nowadays, if people want to conceive, they do tapasya by chanting 50 rounds, which may take 10 to 12 hours. But Queen Kunti and Pandu Maharaj, they performed tapasya for 1 year. Srila Prabhupada, he tells the story of a boatman and a student. The student of technology, he wanted to cross the river. So he got on the boat and he wanted to display his academics. So he pointed at the stars and he said, "Do you know what those constellations are?" And the boatman said, "No, sir. I'm a simple boatman, you know." And then so the student told him, "Oh, you don't know astronomy? You wasted 25% of your life." And so next, he pointed at trees. And he asked him, "Do you know what type of tree that is?" And then the boatman said, "No, I don't study botany. And so the student told this boatman arrogantly, he said, "You wasted 50% of your life." And so a fish sprung up, it jumped above the water, and then the student pointed at it and said, "Do you know what type of fish that is?" And so the boatman said, "No, I'm vegetarian. We don't mess with the fish. You know, we let them do whatever they need to." So the student said, "You haven't studied marine biology. You wasted 75% of your life." And so at this time, there was a dark cloud above them, and it started pouring rain. And so the boatman told the student, we have to get off the boat. We need to swim across." So the student that was very puffed up in academics, he said, "I don't know how to swim." So the boatman said, "Oh, you don't know how to swim? You wasted 100% of your life." So people are missing the important aspects of life, and they're putting priorities on secondary things. The real problems in life are birth, old age, disease, and death. And no doubt material education and economic development is important, but spiritual knowledge or bhakti can free one from the repeated cycle of birth and death. When I go out on books, I sometimes see couples, they're dressed nicely. So I tell them, what is the purpose of life? Is it to have a big house, you know, a nice car? And then they tell me no. And I tell them, what is the purpose of life? And they can't tell me. So they themselves have not even explored understanding who they are. And so these questions a human being should ask. What is the purpose of life? Where did I come from? Who is God? What is my relationship to God? Things like that. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 15, Krishna has made this world Dukkaliyam Ashashvatam, full of miseries and sufferings. And the people in this world, they try to make a comfortable living here. A big house, nice furniture, this and that. They're trying to manipulate material nature, the right weather. And so we try to create artificial rain, artificial food, artificial fragrances, and artificial smiles. There's a book by Devamrita Swami, Hiding in Unnatural Happiness. And there's a picture of a person, she's covering her face, and then there's a smile on it. So I point to this picture and I tell them, this is what we call artificial smiles. And this is what we see in social media. And they really appreciate it. Srila Prabhupada, he says, within the suffering, they will try to become happy. That is not possible. And then so he compares it to the toilet room. He wants to make a deity room. How is it possible? That is not possible. If something by nature is dirty and filthy, we don't try to make it clean. This material world is like a toilet. You do your business and you get out. You don't observe the stool and admire it. You leave. My spiritual master, His Holiness Badri Narayan Maharaj, he would say, yes, you're advancing, but towards the wrong direction. The devotees were also performing austerities. We get up early in the morning, we meditate, we try to control the mind, and most importantly, we control what we eat. Prasadam, when I first started coming here, I noticed this phrase, Prabhu hasn't been offered yet. That's the first thing, And I really like that because we really do try to practice what we preach. We offer the food first to Krishna and then we take his remnants. We do not eat what the karmis eat. And we follow the 4 regulative principles. And the purpose, unlike materialistic persons, our purpose is purification, to go back home, back to Godhead. Demigods, their life is characterized by enjoyment, and human life is characterized by hankering and lamenting. And animal life is characterized by fear, defending. Daniel and I were at Balboa Park, and we saw a person that had this shirt, 905, regular person. And so it made me think of another time where I was in La Jolla Cove, and there was a person walking by. I asked him, "Excuse me, sir, I'd like to share this wonderful book with you." And he said, No, I just want to be a regular person. I want to work my 9-to-5 job. I want to have a roof over my head. I want to have a paycheck. I don't want to read. So I told him, "But sir, there's more to life than that." And he still refused. So even if you tell people that we're presenting something that can make them happy, they still refuse. They're in the mode of passion, and they're absorbed in things in this material world, which is making money, going to bars, and not only that, but to find relationships. See, the soul is looking for love, it's looking for relationship, which is eternal. But when it tries to find it in this material world, it ends in frustration, because ultimately, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, at the time of death, I take everything away. So the prestige that we have, the positions that we have in life, even the relationships, it's all broken. So an intelligent person will try to find ways to establish an eternal relationship. There's a nice saying, the youth sacrifices their health to get wealth, and the old sacrifice their wealth to get health. Young people, they're working so hard, they want to get that wealth, they want to get money. And by doing so, sometimes they don't sleep very much, they're malnourished, things like that. And the old people, when they do have wealth, they want to get their wealth back, they want to enjoy. In the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, text 2 purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions Maharaj Kulashekar, who says to the Lord, "Now my mind is undisturbed and I am quite healthy. If I die immediately, thinking of your lotus feet, then I am sure that my performance of your devotional service will become complete. But if I have to wait for my natural death, then I do not know what will happen, because at the time of death, the bodily functions will be disrupted. My throat will be choked up, and I do not know whether I shall be able to chant your holy name. Better to let me die immediately." For older people, time seems to go by very fast. And for young people, they want the time to go by faster. They're always looking at the time. An example is a student in school. They're always looking at the time. When is it time for recess? When is it time for lunch? Srila Prabhupada, he said there are 3 types of kamas, or desires. The first one is akama, and this means devotees. They have no material desires. They just want to please Krishna, and they're satisfied with rendering service to Krishna. Therefore, they're called akama. And the karmis, they're described as sarvakama. They have unlimited desires. Even billionaires, they have everything. They still want another billion. So sarvakama. And when someone's desires are not fulfilled, they want to become one with God. And so when they think they become God, all of their desires will become fulfilled. And these are called moksha kama. In the purport, it says whether you're a brahmachari, vanapras, sannyas, or a grahastha, you should be very careful when associating with women. I haven't called him, but I have a friend named Mikey. And so he was telling me, I want to go to the gym and I want to quit. I want to cancel my membership. So I told him, okay, I'll go with you. So he was pretty fired up. He was telling me, man, I'm paying this much amount every month. So I told him, yeah, cancel it. So as soon as we got to the front desk, it was a male worker. And told him, what can I do for you? He said, I want to cancel my membership. So I said, okay, I'll be right back. So when he came back, it was a female worker. And then so I told him, okay, I'm gonna step outside. I'm gonna let you do your thing. And so my friend, he started talking to her, and eventually he came back outside. I told him what happened, and then he was nodding his head. He said, I couldn't do it. And I said, why? And he said, man, she was very pretty, this and that. So the girl had convinced him to stay. And it was all due to, the form of a woman. When we get too attached to women, we forget our duty. Srila Prabhupada was discussing the proper relation between men and women, and he says, women and men should live separately. That is also essential. Butter and fire must be kept apart. Otherwise, the butter will melt. You cannot stop it. The man is compared to butter, and the woman is fire. A brahmachari should be very careful not to mix with women or with men addicted to women. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 31, text 35, Prabhupada writes, in other words, attraction for women's association is the cause of the material conditioned life, and anyone interested in being free from this conditional life must detach himself from the association of women. I have a question for you guys. I have a bank, and I want you to invest your time, your hard-earned money into it. Everything into this bank. But I assure you that the bank is going to collapse one day. It's sure to collapse. So would you still invest your money in this bank? It's very obvious, but it's not. So this bank, it represents the body. People put so much time into making it look attractive. They spend money on it. Botox, plastic surgery, things like that. And there's a saying, a cake face. If you ever see a lady and she's full of makeup, there's a thick layer, and it does look like cake. So it's not very attractive. Also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 8, text 7, it says, one who has failed to control his senses immediately feels attraction upon seeing a woman's form, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, when the woman speaks with enticing words, smiles, and moves her body sensuously, his mind is immediately captured, and thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence. Just as a moth maddened by the fire rushes blindly into the flame. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it describes 5 animals: the fish, a deer, moth, elephant, and a bee. And each of these animals, they have a specific sense that's very powerful. The sense of taste is exhibited by the fish. It sees a bait and then it wants to eat it. So then it gets pulled up by the fisherman. So he loses his life. The deer is attracted to hearing. So when he hears the flute of a hunter, it looks for it. And then the deer is captured by the hunter. And then a moth by sight. He sees a bright flame and it rushes towards it. Little does it know that it's actually fire. And an elephant by touch. They want to engage in relationship with the she-elephant. And a bee loses its life by smelling. It goes into a lotus flower. It's very fragrant. It smells very nice. And then it gets intoxicated. And by the end of the night, the lotus flower closes. And he loses his life. And the human being, our senses are all heightened. Sense of sight, smell, touch, taste here. So we should be very careful. We all heard of the camel that chews on thorns. And it doesn't know that it's bleeding and it likes the taste of it. There's a similar story. The wolf in the Arctic and the indigenous people. So what they do is they take a double-edged blade and they melt the ice. And they put the handle in the ice. So the blade is the only thing that's protruding. And so they put blood on the blade. And when the wolf smells it, it licks it, and it starts thinking, hey, this tastes good. So eventually, the wolf loses his life. And Srila Prabhupada, maybe for his fur. Yeah. In the Nectar of Devotion, it says devotees can be divided into 3 classes. The first class devotee, a second class, and a third class. The first class devotee is very expert in arguments and he has firm faith in the scriptures. The second class devotee, he's not very expert in arguing, but he has firm faith. And the neophyte, or the third class devotee, his faith is not so strong, and at the same time, he does not recognize the decision of the revealed scriptures. The neophyte's faith may be changed by someone with strong arguments or by an opposite decision. So this person, a third class devotee, he's one of those people, the 4 different people that comes to Krishna, that's searching for knowledge. And we should always remember that Krishna consciousness is not achieved but awarded to us. So I would like to narrate the story. There was a king, and this king had 4 queens. And the time came when he had a call that said, it's time for you to leave your body. You don't have that much time. And that call will come to everybody in life. So he was told that he had to make this fateful journey. And so he said, who can go with me? Who can accompany me in my journey? So he thought about his 4 queens. So he called the 4th queen. And this queen was someone that he gave all his attention to, his time. He pampered her with everything she wanted. So he thought, surely this queen will go with me. He would go great lengths to ensure that every need of hers was fulfilled and was satisfied. He thought, I have done so much for her, definitely she'll support me in my onward journey after death. So he called her and said, now I have to make this very important journey after death. Will you come along with me and join me and help me? And to his utter shock, the queen replied with one word, no. And she walked away. So the king, he was broken-hearted. He said, I have given so much time and energy to this queen, and look how she's responding to me. The time I need her the most, she leaves. And so he thought, anyway, I have 3 other queens. So he called the 3rd queen, and he asked her the same question. The 3rd queen is someone who he liked to bring along everywhere he went, to all public functions, because she was extremely beautiful. Everywhere he went, he wanted everyone to know and see how beautiful his wife was. When the king asked her, will you join me in my fateful journey? He was also shocked again. She said, no, life is too good. I cannot join you. On the contrary, as soon as you die, I will marry someone else. So the king was not only broken-hearted, but this queen shot an arrow to him. So he thought, I have 2 other queens. So the 2nd queen represents someone that he can have confidential discussions with. When he was in a dilemma or needed some advice or personal help, this queen was ever willing to give advice. So when the queen came, he proposed the same question. Will you help me in this journey? And she said, I would like to, O king, but unfortunately I am unable to do so. I can only come with you to the cremation ground, but I cannot join you after that. Again, the king became disappointed. So he was actually thinking about approaching the 1st queen, but this 1st queen he had neglected. So he didn't give her any time, but this queen, she appeared before him without him even asking. She was very thin, skin and bones, and she looked very emaciated because she hardly had any food, no attention from the king. She looked very miserable. But with a cheerful face, she told the king, "My dear king, I will come with you. I will help you in this onward journey after death." So the king was very shocked, and he became repentant. Of all the queens, I have made a mistake. I did not give any time and attention to this queen. So this changed his mind, and the king and the queen began to spend time with each other, forever how long they remained. Now, the fourth queen represents the body. We spent so much time on whatever it needs, we give it to it. And ultimately, at the time of death, we can't even bring our body. The third queen represents our friends, our relatives. The third queen represents wealth. She represents wealth. Everywhere we go, we want to flash her, look how rich I am, look how much money I have, this and that. But ultimately, when we die, she goes to someone else, either legally or someone will inherit her. And the second queen represents our friends and our families. They want to go with us, but they can't. But the first queen represents Dharma. And Dharma is defined depending on the context, but it ultimately means the quality of something that cannot be separated from that thing. So the Dharma of sugar is sweetness. The Dharma of heat and light is a fire. You can't separate it. And so what is our Dharma? That Dharma, we have to first understand we're the Atma, the soul within the body. We are eternally part and parcel of that one supreme entity. And Krishna says, "I am the source of all living entities." So the Dharma, real Dharma, is loving relationship of the soul to that supreme entity. That's our eternal Dharma. And so we put a lot of emphasis on the body, wealth, our friends and family, but we neglect the soul. So these queens represent these four things. And Hare Krishna, that's it. Any questions, comments, corrections?
So you're mentioning thank you for a wonderful class, Govardhan Prabhu. You were mentioning the three classes of devotees, and we're talking about the neophyte group. And you're talking about the four people who become interested in Krishna consciousness. Can you explain a little bit more about those four and why they're neophytes?
So the four Krishna describes, there are four people that come to Krishna. One is in distress, one is in wanting of wealth, the third one is inquisitiveness, and the other one is actually searching for knowledge. And among these four, Krishna says the one that's searching for knowledge is the best. So that neophyte devotee, he fits in that category. Does that make sense? So yeah. Yes, Mani or Michael?
Thanks for a great class, amazing class. It's not really a question, well, kind of a question, but when you gave the metaphor about the bank that's going to collapse,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about that, because I kind of knew where you're going when you said banking, and I really wish it was that simple, because that's very simple, the way you explained it and everything. And it's a simple decision to make. But see, here's the thing that I see sometimes, and definitely for myself, yeah. So in that example of the bank, see, it's not that simple because the bank pays interest, right? And sometimes when you join the bank, you get a gift also. And if you're with the bank a certain amount of time and you invest a certain amount of money, you get further gifts as the relationship with the bank grows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the real question, I think, in this world they're in first world countries, right, is if there was this bank and you knew it was going to collapse, but you were making, let's say, you had a guarantee that you were going to make 30% interest a year, and it was going to continue year after year after year. And as long as you stay with the bank, you're going to get a few gifts along the way. But you know the bank is going to collapse, but it's going to collapse the day you die. It's going to collapse, but the day you die. Then would you still invest all your money and your time and everything else in the bank?
Yes, that's Krishna consciousness.
But I think a lot of people would say, you know, yeah, I will do that. And that's a little bit more difficult than saying, hey, would you invest everything in the bank if you knew it was going to collapse? Of course, anybody would say no. But you're not, that your premise doesn't take in all those benefits, that's what keeps people doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know you understand what I'm saying? So it's very difficult to not do that. If you believe that the bank is going to, you know, everything's going to go fine till the day you die, then what do you care if you lose all your money the day you die? Now, some people say, well, I would love to pass it on. But in reality, if somebody had that option to invest all their money in a bank and get this exorbitant amount of interest and lose it all the day they die, they'd say, yeah, let my kids make their own way like I did. Mm-hmm. They'd probably take that bargain. You see what I'm saying? So I'm saying for me, can't speak for anybody else, for me, it's much more difficult to say, no, that's ridiculous, I would never do that. Mm-hmm. Because your premise doesn't take into account those temptations. And they're real, because there are benefits. Are they real benefits? Are they Krishna conscious benefits? Obviously not. The material benefits and everything. But the lure is a little bit more difficult to walk away from and not partake in the simple thing of just saying, well, it's going to collapse, so what's the point? Because along the way, you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. That's all. So when we perform material activities, we get good karma or bad karma. But if we perform Krishna conscious activities, it produces zero karma, and like what you said, interest. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, whatever little endeavor on this path, there's no loss or diminution. So whatever we invest in Krishna consciousness at the time of death, we bring that along with us. Whereas material things, that leaves as soon as we leave the body. Like Dravida Prabhu says, our bank account, it has our name on it. That's the body. And when we leave the body, everything in relation to that name, we can't bring. So I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's a little difficult. Yeah.
Another thing is that analogy implies that, you know, you just get to enjoy, and then you die, and there's nothing after that.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that you have to come back, mm-hmm. and you have to try again. And also all the you know, supposed benefits, it's served with a nice big serving of suffering. So there's different factors to take into account, but I think the overwhelming principle is that material analogies only go so far.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mogalila. Yes, Daniel? No? Okay. Thank you for your time and attention. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.